you didn't. Oh, I'm gonna go over the things that we like short. For the first maybe 5 minutes, I'm gonna go quickly over of what we did last time, and if you want to learn about what happened last time, you can go online and watch videos or yourself. So.
Wait, 1 second. Yeah. So last 2 weeks ago, whatever lecture that was, that'll be up on YouTube, and you should definitely watch that. And also, Tim, when you are doing screen stuff, make sure you're recording the screen.
That's way too late. Anyways, we'll see. So today's topic would be on these 3 things: delegation, which I'm going to talk about later, which is basically how you send messages between view controllers or like an object to something else. That how they send messages without actually owning the object. If that makes sense. And then we're also going to talk about a really major view controller or view in iOS, which is called UI table view. You can basically see it in every single view. Most of the applications that you use, for example, Facebook, maybe Facebook make their own, I don't know. But contacts, calendar, everything, basically anything that looks like a list. And then we're also going to talk about UI table view cell, which is for UI table view, Apple gives you a default cells for each table view, but we're going to teach you how to customize your own view cell. And then we're also going to talk about NS. We're going to talk about NS user defaults, which is a way to store your things in iOS. Like, let's say you have some data that you got from the user and you want to store it so that next time they reopen the app, it's still there. And that's how you do it. Okay, this is today's topic. So let's just have a gloss through as what happens last week. So last week, we talked about major data structure. In Objective-C. This include NS string, NS array, NS dictionary, NS data. So NS string is to store text. NS array is to store a list of items, and these items have to be NS objects. NS dictionary is also going to be storing a list of objects, except that if you're going to retrieve it by key, in NS array you retrieve it by index, a number, which item you want. And NS date is just a date, an object that stores a date, a time. And then we also talked about major flow of view controllers. Which is basically how normally you would set up a view, a new view or something like that in your application. For example, like just make a new view. So this separate is based to use storyboard, add your view, connect it with your .h or .n file, which is your implementation files, and then set up connections, and then do behaviors in the .n file. And then we also talk about navigation controller. Which is basically the way how you can transition from one view to another view by pressing a button. It's going to slide to the right to the new view that you want to present. And then we also talked about mode of view controller, which is basically about how you can have a view, like instead of sliding to the right, there's going to be a new view popping up from the bottom. And if you're completely lost right now, it's okay. You can look up these topics, these topics are really important in order to even start an iOS program. And you can either watch videos from 2 weeks ago, or you can just search online and try to learn yourself. So either way works. So today we're going to talk about these four things, and let's start. Okay. So first, let's talk about delegation and data source. So what are they? It's a programming pattern that allows one object to send messages to another object when an event happens. So you might wonder, okay, sure, okay, fine, you're talking about kind of delegation. What's the use of it? So basically when you think about it, there are a lot of things that you want to send messages from one thing to another. For example, let's say you have a contact in your contacts application. You have a list of things, and once you press something, your view has to respond. And in order for that to respond, it's actually sending a message from the view to your controller, which is basically controlling where your list, like the entire contacts application, or that view. So what happens is that this view has to have a delegate, and the delegate would be your entire view controller, and then it sends a message to your controller saying, okay, I got selected. What do I do now? So this pattern allows this communication between objects. And if you're quite lost right now, it's fine because we're going to do an example using the UI table view. Maybe it might become clearer later. And so there are two types, main types in iOS. One is delegation, which is to notify the delegate when an event happens. So basically, this is the example I just gave. Like if I have a list and the user taps something, then the view has to send the message to its delegate to notify the delegate that something happens. It can be something else, for example, what else can it be? For example, like it's not only just tapping. For example, you can slide your list and then you can hit delete. You can also do that with delegation because you're sending a message to the delegate saying, okay, someone tried to delete. Now what do I do? And then the other type is data source. Basically, is to get data from the delegate. So what happens is that if you have a data, so what happens is that for a data view, that's the list view, like in your contacts, at the beginning, it doesn't know what it has to present. It only knows, okay, I'm going to be a table view, I'm going to be a view, I'm going to be a list of things, but I don't know what to present. So it has to ask someone to get the thing to present, and that will be a data source instead of a delegation, instead of a delegate. But it's still like same pattern, programming pattern. So, and the delegate, which is the one that it asks to get the data from, must implement one or more methods to supply the views it needs. Supply data. So here's just an overview of what delegation and data source is, and we're going to use it today to give a sense of how we actually being implemented. Great. And two main examples Okay, two main examples that you can easily think that, well, that is quite often used is UI table view and UI alert view. These are just examples. There are obviously more than that, and you cannot actually build your own delegation protocol. UI table view, you know what it is. UI alert view would be when you press something, something in the middle pops up, like a blue thing, like you see a lot, maybe like there's no connection to something, or like just to alert you something, like just to alert the user. And why do you need that? For example, like the alert view shows up, and there are two buttons. One is like maybe OK, one is like, I don't know, another button. But when the user presses a button, it has to tell the controller, like, okay, I presented myself and someone pressed me. What do I do now? So they use the delegation pattern to send message between the alert view to the view controller. All right, so let's give a little visual here. For example, you have a context. No, this is your phone. So this is your contacts. And then you have this list view here. I mean, your UI table view here. So the entire thing, the entire view, is a UI view controller. And then embedded it, like included, contained inside is another view, small view here. And this view is the UI table view. So what happens is, for the iOS programming pattern, we use this thing called model view controller. So the view never controls data, never sets up behavior. What it does is it only asks for things to present out. So what it's actually controlling is the UI view controller, which is this entire view controller. And then when it asks for data, it will talk to the UI view controller and be like, okay, I'm here. I need to present something. And the UI view controller is going to tell that, okay, what you need to present. Either context, names, anything like that. And, well, just to say it again. So you have your UI table view. Oh, and this is not, so in the case of UI table view, it's both delegation and data source. Data source is when you ask for information, for example, what to present. Delegation is when it asks for someone has pressed me or someone wants to delete something, then that is for delegation. Data source is only for asking data. Delegation is responding to things. So you have this UI table view object here. Talking to a UI view controller. With two types of delegation. One is delegate, and one is data source. All right. So now we're going to learn how to use UI table view. First of all, any question? All right. So the general flow. Well, first of all, just like any other view controllers, you need to add the view. Well, add UI table view to the view controller. for example, you have the view controller and you want to add it to somewhere. You want to add the UI table view somewhere, so you have to set it up in the storyboard. And I hope you know what a storyboard is. And then after that, second step is to set up delegate / data source. So what happens is when you add the UI table view in your storyboard, there's no setup for delegate or data source, which means that if you just set it up and you run the program, you're going to see a table view. That's all. It's not going to ask for any data because it doesn't even have a delegate or data source to ask from. And then third step is to set up outlet in view controller. So what happens is your UI table view, your view controller is going to have a reference pointing to the UI table view that you have set up in your view controller. And then lastly, you have to declare that the class conforms to protocols conforms to delegation protocol. So last you have to declare that the class conforms to delegation protocol. What it means is that UI view controller, normally it doesn't know that it itself is a delegate. So what happens is it has to say that, okay, I'm a delegate. That way, it can implement the methods that the UI table views are asking for. We're going to do an example, so right now it might be really like, what the heck are we talking about? But we're going to do an example at the end. So how do you declare that? By saying, by open arrow UI table view data source, comma UI table view delegate. This is how we declare if a class conforms to a delegation protocol. Oh, actually there's one more step. And that step is the implementation. Implement data source / delegate method. So these are the main 5 steps to use in UI table view. First, you add it to the storyboard. You set up delegation inside a storyboard. You set up an outlet in the view controller. So that the view controller will have a reference to your table view, and then you declare that the view controller class conforms to the delegate protocol, which means that it tells itself that, okay, I'm going to be a delegate by saying this line, and then lastly you implement the data source and delegate method that is needed. Okay. So we have the general flow of how you usually use a table view over there. So now we're going to talk about the major First of all, we have 2 of them that are required. This is for data source. This is for the UI table view data source. these are required because if you are a delegate of the UI table view, you need to make sure that you have these methods, or else when the UI table view is asking for you, you need to be able to respond. Or else if you don't implement these, your app is going to crash. So, one is number of sections. Section. Number of rows in section. So basically the table view is going to ask you, okay, what is the number of rows in the section? So for example, you have a list of 5 items, like 5 contacts, 5 information of people. Then you will have to return in 5 to them, saying that, okay, we have 5 people in that section. Another, asking for number, I guess I don't have to write it out, it's kind of intuitive. It's number of rows in the section, asking for how many rows there are in the section. And then you also have cell for row at index path. So what happens is the UI table view, when you tell him there are 5 rows in the section, let's say, then what happens is it's going to call this method 5 times. And each time it's going to give you an object here, which is a type of NS index path. Index path. And what is an index path? Index path is basically an index that tells you what elements it's referring to. So for example, I tell the UI table view that I have 5 rows in section 0. It's gonna call this method 5 times, and each time it's gonna increment the index path. So it's gonna start from index path 0, and so index path. The main thing that you care about for NS index path is it has 2 variables that you need to care about. One is row and one is section. So what happens is when it calls cell for row at index path, because let's say your table view only has 1 section, so it's going to call it 5 times. Each time the section is going to be 0. The row it's going to go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Every time this is going to change. And here, what happens inside your method is you're going to respond according to what you want to present. So let me write it down. And NS index path has row and section. And then also, so in this method, it's asking for cell for a specific row, and then it's going to give you an NS index path which contains a row and a section. In the section, if you have only 1 section, the section is always going to be 0 because it's section 0, and your row is going to increment. Like if you say you have 5 rows, then it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and each time it asks for a new cell. So what happens is there's a standard way to program this cell for index path. first of all, you would make a static and a string. And usually it's named identifier. Identifier. And then you would just call it. So you just give it an identifier, like whatever you want it to be. So you create a static and a string, and if you don't want if you don't know what a string is, it's basically text, like a label, some words, a set of words, and then you call it an identifier. You can name it anything, and then this is, if you went to the last lecture, this is a way to declare a string. So basically what happens in this line is that you're going to make a string that has cell inside. That is cell. So you have a text, you have place in the memory that has this word cell. And then what's the point of it? So what happens is, in UI table view, it is smart enough that if let's say you have 1,000 items, it's not going to keep making new cells. What it does is it reuses the cell, because you cannot look at all 1,000 items on your phone all at the same time. So it's smart enough that as you're scrolling along, it will refresh and reuse whatever has been made before and to replace it. So identifier is just to tell the UI table view that, okay, I'm going to reuse it. So whenever I see the identifier cell, I'm going to look into my pool of all the cells and see, if there's any one that I can reuse. If not, I'm going to create a new one. And how do I like actually use it? Then I would first make a UI table view cell. So this is a pointer to the actual cell itself, and then you call the method table view deq One good thing about Xcode is that when you type DEQ, you can just hit enter and it will do it. So I don't really remember exactly the word. With identifier. Oh, this is over there. Identifier. Identifier. Oh. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly explain this. So basically what happens in this row is that I'm asking the table view, and ask it, okay, I need a cell. I need a table view cell. And how do I get it? I don't care, as long as it is one of the cells that I used cell to create. Anything that has this identifier. If it is not being presented in the UI table view currently, we use it. If there's nothing in the pool that you can use from beforehand, then make a new one for me. Oh, this all happens in the cell for index path method. And then what happens is right now, you have your pointer to your cell, which is going to be your list of items, each a specific cell in that item. And then at the end, you're going to return cell. Return your cell. It was like, so you can do any manipulation here. For example, changing the cell's text label or changing the cell anything. You can change anything about a cell. So basically here we talked about two main data sources that UI table view uses. And now we're going to talk about the counterpart, I'm not sure if that's the right word, of data source, which is delegate. And as I said before, the main function of delegation or delegate is to like send messages. Data store is to get data. Delegate is to send messages. So you can, and as I said before, one main major delegation that you would want to have is to respond to people selecting the table view. So if you are implementing the UI table view delegate, then these are the methods that you can use to respond to people pressing each stop. First one is this select row at index path. Oh. So this select row at index path. So it basically tells the view controller when a row is selected. So basically, well, I've already said it many times, but when a UI table view is being selected, it's going to send a message to your UI view controller, which is this icon, this main UI view controller, by calling this method called didSelect at index path. And inside this method, you're going to do whatever you want to respond to that selection. And then, well, there are other ones that you might be interested. One is commit editing style. Well, actually the name is really long. This is like just part of it that I'm just like giving you a sense of what the name is going to look like. And the actual implementation is going to be much longer than I can write all the way to the end of the board. This basically, when the user wants to delete or like slide to the right and press delete, this method is going to be called. Alrighty. So now I'm going to show you how to actually put all these things into practice. First of all, any question?
Would you say commit editing style for these?
So commit editing style is, well, maybe I should write it down. Well, you know what? I don't know. So it tells, so commit editing style is when the user slides to the right, and you know how there's a delete button that shows up. When they hit the delete button, this method is going to be called. Okay. So, quick time. Yeah. I know how you do there. Is it there? Is it working now? Do I have to record by screen? Oh. Is it working? I can read it out. Click to record the full screen.
Yeah.
How do I stop?
Don't worry about that.
Okay. Okay, anyways, so you go to your Xcode, and if you haven't done it, then it's going to be really fast. You create your project, single view application, give a name. I will call it, what should I call it? UI table view example. And I'm just going to make it in my desktop. Cool. So, you run the program, you're going to see a white screen as expected. So, first of all, what is the first step that you do? Can anyone answer? Who took notes? What is the first step, like your general flow for using table view? Yeah?
Table views the view controller.
Exactly. So here at the right, under right bottom corner, if you search UI table view, you see this thing here. Okay, cool. Put it in like that. And if you were here for the last lecture, we also talked about you can embed the entire view controller inside a navigation view controller. So right now you have two things. You have this navigation view controller, and inside there's a view controller, and there's a table view on top of it. So if I run it, what's going to happen? It's going to have a tab bar on top, and then you have the UI table view again. First step. What's the second step? You can say it. You don't have to raise that right hand.
Set up the delegate.
Exactly. Set a delegate. So what happens is you hold control, hold it, drag it to your view controller, and here you see two things: delegate and data source. And in this case, we need to connect both the data source and delegate to your view controller. So I'm going to do it twice. Delegate. So right now the delegate is set up already, just like you did. Okay, so this is your view controller, and if you look inside Start tab, which is really useful most of the time, you see this class is view controller. And then you have this class here, which is basically directly two things. This class, view controller, and this view controller are directly connected. So basically what you do inside this view controller, it's going to be responding to this view controller. And what would happen if I run now? Yes? So I would predict that it would crash. See, it crashed. So why? Because, as I said before, these methods here are required, and we didn't do anything with that yet. So what happens is, the table view is asking your view controller, okay, I need these things. Except that the view controller is like, oh, I don't know what to do. So that's why the app crashes. So what happens is, inside your view controller, .h, .m, you're going to have to, what is the third step?
Set up an outlet in the view.
Okay, cool. Yeah, set up the outlet in the view controller. And if you haven't done it before, because we've actually done it a couple times, so let's do this. Where, how do you do that? You press it, press it to your controller, and you go to your .h file of that view controller. So right now I'm selected the table view, and then control drag here. And then I'm setting up an outlet of the table view. So right now, there's a connection between the view controller and the table view. And what is the fourth step? Anyone? I don't remember. I think it's a set up delegation protocol. Okay.
Declare that the class.
Yeah, declare that the class, and by using that line over there. So where do you put that line? You put the line right next to interface, view controller, UI view controller, you put it right here. You say UI table view so data source, comma, UI table view so delegate. So right now, your file of the view controller, you'll see there's a warning. It says table view number of rows and section in protocol is not implemented. Why? Because these two methods are required, and because you didn't implement it, it's going to ask you to implement it, or else if you run the app, it's going to throw an error. Or crash, basically. So here, So we just need these two methods in order for the thing to work. So I'm just going to type it in. The two methods that we need. One is the cell for row that index path. UI table view cell. Okay, and it's throwing an error because I'm not giving anything back. It's expecting me to return something. Oh, by the way, can you guys see this? Is this?
A little bit. Yeah.
Except it's way too. Here. Yeah, okay. Okay. And then cell will provide an index path, and because it's expecting me to return a UI table view cell, but I'm not returning it, so that's why it's there's an error here. It controls reaches end of non-void function, which means that it expects something to be returned. And then the other one is number of rows in section. This is also really important. See, once you put these things in, the warning disappears because you have the two functions here, except that there's an error because you're not returning anything. So cool. So if you did not attend the previous lectures, this might be really funky, but here's what we do. So what we're trying to do is that we're going to have an array, a list of things that we need to show to the user. And right now I'm just going to make 3 items, and I'm going to put it inside an array, and each item is just going to be a string of a person's name, for example. So what happens is, on the top here, inside interface, I'm going to say property, non-atomic, ns array, ns mutable array, what about it? Let's see. Mutable array, I'm just kind of names. This is basically a way to say that I'm going to use this variable, ns mutable array. And in view to the load, I want to add 3 things to this array. How do I do it? I say self.names, add object, I don't know, well, name 1, add object, name 2, names, add object, name 3.
You can't think of names.
Shut up. Anyways, so what happens is we created so right now this view controller has an array, an immutable array, and that array contains 3 objects, and it's name 1, name 2, and name 3. So I want to present that to the UI view control, UI table view. And if I run this right now, it's going to crash because it won't even let me run it. So how should I do this here? So number of rows in section, what would that be? Any suggestions? How many rows are there? If I want to present these 3 things. 3, exactly. Okay, so you can say return 3, except that in the programming perspective, you probably wouldn't want that because your array you don't know the size of the array. Like you might want maybe I don't even know what I'm trying to say. But let's say you want to add people along the way when the program is running, so you don't want that to happen. So what you can do is you can say self.names.count, which is basically whatever the length of the array is. Okay, and here in this self row at index back, basically you just need to copy and paste whatever I've written up there, which is static and a string. If you don't understand this part, it's basically fine because you don't really need to understand that much, like about this. And then you say UI table view cell is equal to table view EQ. See, if I type EQ, it shows up. I don't even know what that is. And I just say identify. So right now I got this cell. The problem is, right now, this cell, the view controller actually doesn't know, the table view actually doesn't know where to get the cell. Like it doesn't know what you want. Like for example, do you want the size to be bigger? Do you want to add images on it? It doesn't even know how to get one. So it has to have a template in order to make the table view cell. So what happens is Apple has a standard default UI table view that we can use, and we're going to use that for now. And so you say if cell is equal to nil, which means that if you can't find any new cell that is reusable from the pool that has been created before, then I want you to create a new one. So you say cell is equal to UI table view cell, allocate memory, init with style, UI table view cell style default. Well, you can, okay, so there are 4 kinds of styles. You have subtitle, you have value 1 and value 2. I don't exactly remember what the difference they are. I mean, it's just a formatting thing. And then we use identifier, you will use your identifier that you created before. Okay, quick recap. So you have this cell identifier, which is reused every single time. And then you have created this cell pointer that asks the table view to take back whatever has been created before, but it's not currently being used, using the identifier. And if the table view cannot get any cell back, it's going to ask it to create a new one using the identifier. Okay, this is basically a standard way of doing things. Like, if you really don't understand it, you can just memorize this because you're going to do it all the time. Or maybe not this line, but these 2 lines, you're probably going to use it all the time. And then at the end, I have to return the cell. So what happens is, in this method, you're going to create a cell and give it back to the UI table view and say, okay, this is a cell that I want you to present in that column, in that row. Except that you can't really see a difference if I run it right now because, yeah.
Could you also go back to the .h file?
Yes.
Thank you.
Except that if you run it right now, you won't see a difference. Because what happens is it just makes a cell, and the cell is completely blank, and you did not set anything on top of it to change. So, in order to actually see a difference, you would say you would set the text of the cell. So each cell would have a default text on top of it. You want to change that text to whatever you want. Like in this case. In this case, I want to change the cell to my names for each of them. So what I would do is say I say cell set cell dot text label dot text. So first of all, we ask for the text label of the cell, and then I want to point to the text of that text label. Is equal to cell dot names, which is getting the names, the name list, and I want item index path dot row. I hope it doesn't look too overwhelming. So this is how you access an array that we talked about last class. So basically, I'm taking the item of a specific row in the array, and then I just put that item, like in this case it would be name 1, name 2, name 3, into the text label. So what happens is, when this method is being called, it's going to give the cell, including that text label, to the UI table view, so that it can be presented to the user. So let's run it. Let's see. what happens is, this is a pointer. It's a NS-mutable array pointer, and you need to first at the beginning say that the pointer points to some memory location. So in the beginning, you have to say self.names is equal to NS-mutable array new. You have to say that, okay, I'm gonna put a mutable array in this pointer. And because I forgot to do that, what happens is these adding names does not actually do anything. So there's 0 object originally just now, and it's not there. And that's why this method was not even called anytime, because this table view cell thought that there's nothing to present. So now it will work. Okay, anyways, and then, well, you probably want to add some functionality. For example, let's say an example. Let's set a button. Oh, we're a little short on time. For example, I want to add a button. I just dragged a button. Hopefully you know what I'm doing. And I want to change it to a add button. Add. And then now, here on this assistant editor, I want to connect this button to an action. We've done this a couple times before, as you can tell. Add new name, I guess. I don't know. So right now, this button is connected to a method here in the view controller. Add button, and when you press that button, it's going to call this method. And I don't know, I mean, we can just do self.names, add object. I want to add random name. So what happens is when you press that button, a new object is going to add to a list. Except that the table view doesn't know that it has to reload. It's not smart enough to keep reloading every single time. So you have to tell the table view to reload. So you say self.tableView, reload data. And with these 2 lines and that connection that we just made, if we run it and we press plus, it's going to keep adding. So we've shown an example of how to use data source, right? That's a data. These 2 methods are from the data source of the UI table view. And then now let's talk about delegate. So as I said before, there are 2 main ones that you might want to look into. One is called committing editing style. Oh. Well, I will comment this out first right now. And the other one is did select table view, did select row with index path. I wrote that out before, as you remember, probably. So what happens is this method is going to be called when a row is selected. So I'm just going to say self.tableView.background color is equal to UI color. I just set it to some color. Let's make it blue. So what happens is if any row inside that table view is being pressed, the background color is going to change to blue. Let's see if it works. Change to blue. Yeah, and you might wonder, oh, so why does the cell don't change to blue? Because the cell, if you want to change the cell to blue, you can actually do it here when you tick the cell, or you can just say cell.background color is equal to UI color, clear color. Oops, clear color. So that it doesn't even have color. Then in that case, you will see all of them. So here, so basically anything that you want to do with a specific cell will be implemented inside this cell for row index path. In anything that you want to respond to a touching of a cell, you will have to implement in the did select row index path. And I think this is quite interesting, is that if you don't implement the commit editing, if you don't have that line in your code for committing editing style, and if you try to slide, it won't let you slide. Like you can't slide it. But as soon as you add this line in, and you try to slide it, you can see the delete thing coming up. So what I would say you can do is like you can just, okay. When it's being called, it's going to pass you this variable called editing style. There are different types of editing style. One type is deleting, and you can also move things around. I think there are the only two main ones. So you would say if editing style is equal to UI table view editing style delete. So you need to check that if the editing style is delete. If it's delete, you need to delete self dot. You have to delete, remove the object from your list, right? Index path, object at index path, and path to row. I know this might be a little overwhelming if you have no experience at all, but this is what you would do: delete things from an array. So a quick recap of this method. This method is being called when someone tries to commit an editing. So these editing, two main ones are deleting and moving rows around. And for deleting, you would first need to check the editing style because this variable will be stored, will have like what type of editing you want to do. So if it's an editing, then you would delete it from your array, and you want to remove your object at the index. And what is that index? That index would be this index path that the table view sends you. And as I said before, index path, there are two main things inside. One's a section, one's a row. And since we have one section, the section is always going to be 0. And your row is going to be correspond to your array directly. And one thing that you also need to do is just by saying that, your cell is not going to disappear. So you can say self.tableview. Oops. I'll do it inside of if self.tableview. Well, just reload data. So that you can reload it again, and so that the thing that is being deleted is gonna, like the change is gonna appear. And if I run it again, slide it and delete it, it's going to disappear. Wow, we're running out of time. Let's see anything else I want to include. Yeah, that's the main thing that I want to include. So here's how you do. Here's how you use UI table view, like the general UI table view, and using a default cell. And for the next, I don't know how many minutes, we're going to talk about how you can customize this view, because you might want to make this longer, bigger, or you want to add images inside, or you want to, I don't know, if you want the name to reach to the right side versus to the left side, you might want to use a custom cell. Yeah, let's have a break.
Yeah, let's have a break. And if you guys have any questions,
yeah, if you guys
come
have
up
any
and let us
questions,
know.
feel free to come out and
Yeah, and table views are really important. You can do a lot with them, and you can show images, a lot of text, little text. You can have big cells, small cells, and he's going to teach you how to customize it. It's pretty easy, and it's really, we're really lucky to have people that ask how to do this stuff, and I'm pretty sure every application is going to need a table view. So it's very useful. It's one of the most useful views to know. Yeah, so it's great. What's up?
UI table stuff. And what I've done just in the break, I just added a new class, which is just an object class for recipes, which has a name, a detail about the recipe, and whatever the image file is named. So in the view controller, I created 3 recipes and just an array of these recipes. So we're gonna create custom UI tables themselves that show a picture of the recipe and the name of the recipe and then a little bit of detail about the recipe.
How did you add the recipe class? It's like file new,
Yep, file new,
file, or
File. and Objective-C class, and then it's gonna be a subclass of an NS object.
and then you just do import recipe that is on.
Yep, yeah, just at the top of the .h, you import. And they're just a NSVable array of objects. So we're gonna stick around Tim's code a little, and here instead of returning a self-unused account, we're gonna return recipes count. So it has the correct number of rows, which is dependent upon the recipes. And we're gonna go into storyboard for this. Most of it's gonna be done in storyboard. And in the table view.
Sorry, you didn't have to say self.recipes? It's just.
Okay, so because it's synthesized, okay, go to your view controller. So you might think, oh, why do the other ones you have to say self.names? This one you don't have to say that. So if you scroll up all the way to the top, there's this thing that, where's your?
You synthesize in the header. Or wait, no.
Yeah, wait.
Oh, because you put it. Okay, because so what happens is this is a. Just put it back in. That's just not a good. Okay, so property, right? Non-atomic, and it's mutable, right? Recipe.
These are 2 different ways of.
Yeah, it's the same thing basically.
Yeah.
So this is like this normal way of doing it, and then you will here you will go. So see, then it yells. It's like, why do you call it synthesize? Then why do you call it recipes instead of self.recipes? And you can use synthesize recipes. And what happens is it just converts whatever self.recipes to recipes. Then you can just use it like that.
Yeah. So.
In other words, so for the example that we had before for names, if you don't want to sort of type self.names, you can just synthesize names. Then you can just use the word names instead of self.names every single time.
So we add a table cell to the table view. And right here, you can just resize it automatically, the height and the width. Anything you want the width 100. And you can also edit that here if you want to do it numerically instead of visually. We are going to call, we need to label the identifier so that we know what it is. We can identify it in the view controller.
And then style has custom. So.
Yeah, it's a custom cell. We can add a UI image view to show a picture of the recipe. You can size that however you want. I'm just gonna make it small. They're also going to add a UI label. For the name of the recipe and a second label for the description. And what I'm going to use mainly for this is tags to identify what the view is within the cell, because you need to know that when you're accessing it in the view controller. So for the UI image view, I'm going to go with 100. You can do any number though; it doesn't have to be in the hundreds or anything like that. 101 for 2. Wow.
Can you just change the line property instead of tags? No, it's all about that. Just look at it.
Oh, thank you. Don't change the lines.
I'm like pointing at the screen.
cell per row with index path. You can see the identifier is cell, which is what we had previously. So that lines up with the storyboard. We don't actually need this part anymore since we are using the storyboard. And this is for if you're just using the standard Apple table view cell. And what we want to add here is stuff to basically tell the image view what we're showing it. So we'll start with the image view and say, access the recipe. So this line, it just accesses the recipe that is within the recipes array that we created earlier. So like for the first cell, it'll grab the first one, the second one, third one, which is 0, 1, 2, since we're counting starting with stuff. Okay, so view with tag is actually very helpful. It's going to search the cell and its subviews to try and find a view that has the certain tag which we set in the storyboard.
This is really useful. I didn't know that until
Yeah.
yesterday, that you can do it that way.
Because otherwise you have to iterate through all of the subviews in the cell, so this is a lot more convenient. Yeah, and this, we're just trying to find the image view. Image view. And this is just setting the image to be what we labeled it in the NS array. That's the recipe. Next, we're going to do the UI label for the name of the recipe. And one thing that I don't know if you guys know about, but what we're doing right here with this UI label star in parentheses is casting it into a UI label. Right now, it's just returning a view to us, and so we're going to cast it as a UI label since we know that's what it is, and we want to use the UI label functionality. And we're going to repeat this. And that's good. Let's try it. There you go. So there's the first recipe. I just labeled them recipe 1, recipe 2, recipe 3. But you can see the little picture, and you can move that picture around and change the sizes and everything. So that's.
Yeah, you can just do that. I mean, if you want to recite anything, you can just do it in storyboard by just dragging it around.
Yeah, which is a really convenient way to organize, because otherwise you're doing it programmatically and kind of just guessing, oh, did I place this in a thing that's going to look weird, or is it lining up correctly with other things?
How did you import the images into file?
Oh, that part is actually really easy. So say you get an image offline and you just save it to your downloads folder. You literally just drag it from, like, we saved them on a desktop. And all you have to do is grab it and drag it into this supporting files folder. and then just let go, copy items into destinations group folder, press finish, and you've got it. And then in order to access it, all you have to do is use, right here, you just say, you create a string with just the name of it. It's very, very simple, very easy to use.
And when you get it, you say UI image,
Yeah.
image name,
Image name right here.
and then put your name of the thing. And then there, that way you can make the image. Do you think you still want to keep going, or do you guys want to learn about storage, or do you think it's okay? Like are you finished?
Yeah, I mean, you can also set, one more thing is you can also set the background color of the cell, so you can say, cell dot background, oops, cell dot content view.
What can you do with storage?
Store anything.
Okay, I think that's really useful. Okay. If people have to go, you can go, but like,
We're gonna
I
talk
think
about
storage is really
storing things
an
after
important
this.
thing.
It's gonna be like 3 lines, so.
yeah.
Yeah, so you can also change the color of the background image for the cell. And that's just using cell.contentView.background color. And I think that's, yeah, that's it.
So yeah, the YouTube video is gonna be up if you guys ever want to go over some of the stuff again.
So it's gonna be really quick. It's gonna be like 10 minutes to talk about NSU. Well,
Just because some of these apps, like people are asking me about databases and stuff, and all this complex stuff. You guys,
We'll probably want to access the user's data, so I think it's where the investment goes.
so basically, well, I didn't expect that to that fast, but what? Anyways, so should I go over the detail or not? So the word for the professional word for storing things is called persistence in computer science, and essentially there are three main things that are being used in Objective-C or in iOS programming for storing things. One is called NSU default, and we have .plist one, and then we also have NSUser. And we also have core data. So NSUser default is basically you can store any NS object. For example, NS string, NS array, NS date, any NS object. It's really easy to use. All you need to do, but you don't no control of where the data is being stored, and you store and retrieve by key. So what happens is, let's say you have a string. You have a string of some message or something like that, and you want to save it. So you can just say, oh, I want to store this text into the database, and I give it a key. Let's say my key is hello world. The next time I want to take that thing out of the database, I just need to say, I want the item named hello world. That is basically how you do NSUser default. .plist is much more complicated. Well, maybe not much more, but definitely more complicated. You know exactly where it's stored, where file is stored. And both of these, you rewrite the entire file every time. Which means that, let's say you have something, let's say you have some, I don't know, some object and you want to store it. And if you use NSU default or if you use .plist, your entire old thing is going to be wiped out and then put on top of it the new thing. So it's going to be replaced. Core data, however, it's faster because it uses SQL. Actually, maybe not SQL. Oh, well, it depends, but it's faster and it's usually used for large databases. Usually, maybe not. It doesn't have to be large. Usually used when a database is out databases when used for a database. What about? Okay, so we have these three mechanisms that we can use. One is NSU default, which is the thing that I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show you .plist and core data. Core data is like much harder than both of these. And .plist is like okay, except that you still need a substantial, well, not that much, but like a couple lines of code in order to make this happen. And also you need to learn about other things to make this work. So NSU default, as I said, you can store any NS object, except that if you want to have your custom class, for example, recipes, like you want to store your custom class, you can use NSU default. I believe you can't, but it's possible you can. I've never tried it before, but I don't think you can. But .plist and core data, these you can basically store anything, except that the .plist may be slower because it, as I said, it rewrites everything every time you want to get something or rewrite something. Cool. So it's really easy to use.
What might be an application that will use NSD or default?
Well, anything that you want to store. For example, you have maybe your app needs to take in some user that types in a location or like a message or something like that, and you want to, oh, for example, that app that we just have right now, the recipes, right? Probably you want to allow the user to add recipes or delete recipes. And when you close the app and reopen it, you probably don't want the recipe to die, to disappear. So what you can use is you can use these persistent mechanisms to store your things. And I'm not sure if you can store things with NSU default with recipes, but anyway. So NSU default. Have you tried it before?
Yeah.
You
Actually, in my latest app, for example, in order to store people's like certain contacts that people are accessing, I have a change of address app. In order to store the contacts that people are accessing most frequently, I use NSU defaults for a lot of information instead of.
How do you store like the recipe, the entire recipe?
You can store any strings.
Can you like store, can you put a class inside? Can you put like recipe inside?
I don't think that you can do it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, anyway. So basically, it's only 3 lines that you need to care about. And these are the main 3 lines to store things. User, defaults, FAULTS, star, defaults, is equal to, open parentheses, NS, user, default, standard, default, there's the first line. The second line is just calling that default. Set object. And then put your whatever object you need in here. Or a key. And then give it a key. The key, usually I use NS string. I'm not sure if hello. And then you just get default. Synchronize. And these 3 lines, just by these 3 lines, you can store things in your database. And if you want to retrieve it, you can just say default object or key. And then put back whatever a single value is.
Can you just move the photo over a little bit, actually?
We were gonna do a so default object for key to get it back. Synchronize. And oh, by the way, synchronize, well technically you don't have to do that. If you don't do synchronize, it's gonna be saved at some point. So if you call this object, it's not gonna be saved yet. If you call synchronize, it's gonna be saved. And if you don't call it, it will be called at some point. You don't know. So let's say when you close the app, it will definitely be called. So that everything is actually stored. But by the time you call this, it is not stored yet. It just say that, okay, I need to store it at some point. Cool. So let's do an example. Yeah, I could just use the example that we have. Pretty quick, very quick. So, well, I guess I have to take out on anyway, so let's take this out, take this out, take this out. And add back that line if cell is equal to nil. But it will be cell Ella init with style, twice equal to style, equal so style default identifier cell, and then I just need to delete the cell. Okay. Delete the cell. Cell is equal to. And then instead of recipe count, I change it to cell name count. And then let's see if it works. Well, I guess in that case. Well, anyways, well, that would be useless. So remember how in Allie it's going to add the random names, right? If you save it and if you close the app and you rerun it again, it's going to return its original thing. So what happens is here, in the queue to load, what you can do is instead of saying self.names, you can say the line that we had before, ns user defaults. Defaults is equal to ns user defaults shared standard why I can't use default is because it's a keyword that is already used by Apple, so you can't use default. So I just use default. I mean, this variable name is completely arbitrary, so you can do it whatever you want. Standard. And let's say default key object for key. I will just say hello. And I would say self.names is equal to, right? Then, like when the view is first loaded, I want to see if there's an object, that there's an array that is being stored before. And if that object is not available, nil, then I create a new one. So recap. Well, we make this NS default object, and we ask for the object for the key hello. And you can realize that at the beginning, like the very first time we run it, there's not going to be, it can't return anything because we didn't store it before. So it turns out that it has nothing in it, it's going to make a new one. So cool. How do you save it? Then first of all, I can make a new button. I just press save, and then I will open this tab here and make a connection. I will drag this here, drag it, and I'll just go to save. Make sure it's an action, not an outlet. And connect it. And we go here. I know it's kind of going pretty bad, but next time. Anyway. So here under save, we're just gonna do whatever I had before, the same thing, except instead of using object for key, I will say set object for key. Standard, and then defaults, set object for key. And what kind of object do I want to store? I want to store my own names, right? And then I want to call, the key should be hello. And I need to call default synchronize. So when the button save is being pressed, this method is going to be called, and I'm going to get this NS user default, and I'm going to set the object for key hello, and I need to call synchronize. Maybe actually, if you don't call synchronize, it will still work, but I just to resave, I'll call synchronize. Let's run it. The first time nothing happens. And if I add something, and if I don't press save, if I rerun again, it's not there. But if I got plus, I hit save, finger crossed, it is there. So this is how you use NS user default. Quick recap. Here at the beginning, you will call NS user default, get the standard default, and then you need to get, if this is inside view.load and the view is first loaded, and you set yourself.names to the object that you get from the key, and if it's not there, which means that your app is first opened the very first time, you set it equal to new. If it checks if it is nil. Nil means nothing. And if it is nil, then we'll make a new one and add object. However, if it is stored before, then this will not be nil, then it will completely be swiped out. So then you're setting yourself.names equal to whatever object it returns, the old one. And then at the end, when you press save, you just call the same thing, except this time instead of calling object for key, you say, you call set object for key. And as long as you're using the same key, you're gonna get the exact same object out. And make sure that, it's case sensitive, so make sure that your keys are completely the same. And one key can only be used for one object. You cannot use it for if you use another object and store it in the same location, it's just gonna overwrite it. All right, we're done. Thank you for coming. And office hours of Monday, 6 to 8 if you have a question.